All right. So we're in here. I'm gonna let the video upload right quick. Okay. This is Trump and the G Parses Hunter Biden plea deal. The president's son has been in the news recently. He's been in the news definitely news a lot leading up to or during the presidential election, where there was a lot of noise around a hidden laptop, a stolen laptop, and what was on the laptop, and whether the FBI had the laptop and had reviewed it, so on and so forth, and the whereabouts or the credibility of the person who sort of found the laptop. But it seemed like the Republicans were trying to sort of stop, sort of warn the American public about the dealings of Hunter Biden, and then the media stepped in and quelled any talk of Hunter Biden. Anybody talked about on social media immediately got shut down in order to protect presidential candidate Joe Biden. Now that he's elected, now it seems like the worst case scenario has happened, where this has sort of come to a head, where Hunter Biden has recently pled to misdemeanor tax offenses and also a felony firearm crime. But first with the economy, in my opinion, it's the same old, same old. Wages are declining. I think the economy is not that strong for the majority of American people, and it seems to be flagging for the investor class now that the Federal Reserve has removed the punch bowl. And recent conversations recent meetings from the Fed, Fed President Jerome Powell said that there could be more rate hikes in store. I doubt it. I think the rate hikes have run their course. I think they made their point. The Fed has made its point. They removed the punch bowl, and now inflation is going to do what it does. They want to tamp down inflation, but there's so much you can do. How much interest rate hikes can you have, especially after a decade of record low interest rates? That being said, I think the thing to look out for, I think the narrative going forward will be the impact on commercial banks, as they've had these very low interest rate loans, mortgages, and now their cost of capital is going up. You're going to see a lot of banks with a negative net interest margin, where their lending rate, their interest income is gonna be lower than their cost of capital. So it's going to lead to bank losses and probably some more bank bailouts. And the Fed is sort of intimating that they're going to help banks, but they're also going to tax banks as well. For those who don't do well, they may claw back bonuses from executives. But I think the die has been cast, in my opinion, that this is all self-inflicted by the Fed. There are going to be more bank failings, and there are going to be fewer banks going forward. The other thing is, they want on commercial real estate will be the next shoe to drop. Who didn't see that coming? That people just bidding up assets just because it's backed by the Fed, and now you have a bunch of commercial banks sitting on bad commercial real estate loans. We'll see if they blame black folks this time like they did last time for these bank failures. But the other thing is that again, in the urban areas, these cities are struggling. You see a lot of homelessness in urban areas. You see a lot of people, a lot of drug overdose deaths still going through the roof. And particularly in downtown areas, you see people just camping out in front of retail stores that have closed. And there will be more retail closing as soon as the leases are up. Retailers are just leaving. They having a hard time attracting customers, and the customers they do attract tend to steal. So that doesn't make for a good long-term business model. And you're seeing just retailers just closing up shop. And you see downtown just homeless people outside of buildings that aren't, with nobody inside, apartment buildings with nobody inside because they can't afford the rent, which is sort of perverse. That the investor class are sort of just hoarding cash and hoarding real estate, and people can't really get in because they can't afford the rent. And this is the economy that we've been talking about for the past decade. And so now we're here, and I think we're going to be in a perpetual doom loop for a while, where you're going to see banks failing and the Federal Reserve stepping in to prop them up, and the investor class, sort of treading water while everybody else just kind of like work to stay afloat. That's sort of my opinion on the economy.
Yeah, man. It seems like it's almost a broken record that we've been on for the past few years. Really, since even before the pandemic, it was just harder, I think, for the broader public to see and feel. Being the canary in the mine, unfortunately, ends up being just that sometimes a small beacon, a small signal, a small voice, smelling out the carbon monoxide before before it hits people. But people tend not to kind of wake up to it until they see those first set of people fall out from the carbon monoxide, and then they realize, oh, there's some poisonous gas in here. So, um, I think it's kind of short term. You hit on one of the biggest points, at least in my opinion, that's going to have an impact on everyday households that really may not see, well, what does commercial real estate have to do with me? I've never bought into a REIT. I don't even have any commercial real estate holdings. I collect my paycheck on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis. Try to make ends meet. What does that have to do with me and my family? And the unfortunate part is the I don't think that there is a commercial bank in the country that doesn't have commercial real estate as a big part, significant part, at least 20% or more of their holdings. So looking at this boom of work at home folks, and kind of this friction between employers and employees that are butting heads of wanting to stay home versus employers that want to fill offices back up again. And it looks like so far the employees are largely winning that battle. It's significantly harder to justify a large labor force coming back in when we've just proven over the last 2 years that 90% of, of jobs that are largely intellectual based can be done remotely. Customer service, financial services, a lot of white collar jobs can be done remotely. So it's hard to make that argument as an employer that it's better suited. And they're really throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it to make said argument. But the long and short is this: that is causing a bottom to drop out of commercial real estate. No longer can large, even Fortune 1000 companies justify price tags of 100, 200, 300K a month in a lease and be locked in for 7 years, 10 years. And while when those leases were first signed, the Fed was pumping money to their friends for the last 13 years. And when you had the Fed backing you up, what could go wrong? Well, until a pandemic decides to come along and screw all of that up. So what does that mean for the average person that has no exposure to commercial real estate, even via their 401k, certainly their individual holdings? Well, the bigger kind of impact is the fact that banks have already been implementing kind of banking friction policies, where we are seeing that banks are already looking to implement some sort of lockup policies, holding policies. So, for example, you put $100 into your bank, you cash your check, and the bank may say, "Hey, we're going to lock up 20% of that." we're going to lock up 30% of that. And you only have access to 60 or 70% of your money. And that's going to be on our terms. And the immediate thought to a lot of folks is, outside of the knee-jerk reaction, to say, well, no, they aren't, or who the heck are they? Until you realize, well, how powerful banking and financial cartel is, that really kind of controls pretty much every aspect of American life. So there really is no aspect of life you can turn to that does not intersect with the banks. But that also matriculates into not just traditional checking and savings, but even money market accounts. Why? Because they're also banks. You have an account with Schwab, you have an account with TD, you have an account at Webull, at Robinhood. Well, guess what? These are banks. They still fall within similar regulatory frameworks. Some, whether they're an investment bank versus a commercial bank, there is still a regulatory framework and internal policies that can be drafted up and implemented. Robinhood already gave a taste of that from the investment banking side just a few years ago with the whole GameStop debacle, when one could easily argue that GameStop was well on his way to $1,000 a share. Of course, we'll never know at this point. Why? Because Robinhood did something that was completely unprecedented, and certainly that was a absolute shock to retail investors, that a financial institution could simply pull the plug on the movement within the market. So that tells you the breadth and width of these financial institutions, and how the average person is largely unprepared for such policies to be implemented. We already, have seen study after study that tells us, what I believe 60% of the American public is not prepared for a $500 a month emergency, let alone $1,000 emergency. So that tells us that a large portion of the population is living paycheck to paycheck, which means that every penny of those checks are needed, as a large portion of folks, by the time they get the check, they're already in debt. They're already paying off and really servicing debt, and really just kind of juggling, well, which Peter am I going to rob to pay which Paul? So, we already see what 30% of credit card debt is holding for groceries. We see in groceries being paid on installment plans. This is not a pretty picture. So imagine what this fallout is going to look like when the average person, whether blue collar, white collar, or otherwise, goes to cash their check or goes to open their banking app because their direct deposit is hit, and they see the available balance, and there's a difference between the unavailable balance, and the sheer amount of calls that are going to be made and inquiries. Hey, I'm supposed to have $2,000 in here. I need my $2,000. What's holding up? Oh, well, we've decided to hold back, 10%, 20%, 30%. Oh, and by the way, you did agree to it, that time 2 weeks ago that you logged in and you clicked agree to these changing terms and services. So you already agreed that you were going to be aware of this holdback period. So, we can see how this thing is going to play out, or potentially play out. And that's going to have a potentially devastating impact on the majority of American households. So I think that's for me the bigger impact of the commercial real estate dropping out.
Yeah, the other thing is that in this dystopian world where a few people have resources, The resources are concentrated in the hands of very few people, and the majority of people don't have resources. Can you really fight back against these policies? People aren't gonna speak up, aren't gonna be as eager to speak up as they would have 20 years ago. Now they can't really fight back. You can't fight the government and ask for the government for something on the other side. Some of these this sort of commercial real estate fallout was kind of signaled by the retail sector when these stores like Macy's, Victoria's Secret were stuck in these malls with these mall leases and couldn't get out of them because people were leaving. People weren't shopping in malls as much; they were shopping more online. So, the shift to online shopping, that shift to working online, is hitting everybody, and that's just the reality. At some point, this commercial real estate bubble was going to pop, and it looks like it's here. Okay. So on to Hunter Biden. So he pled guilty to misdemeanor tax offenses and a felony firearm charge. He will face no jail time. But we all know that there's been influence peddling from the White House, from presidents, vice presidents, and their kids, while in office, while out of office, and that's part of the job. That's part of being president or vice president. But I don't think we've seen in a while where someone actually pled guilty. And so this sort of goes beyond the pale, in my opinion. And now you've officially seen the collapse or deterioration of the institution of the White House. A lot of U.S. institutions are failing. And we've said previously, the U.S. is a failed empire. A lot of our institutions, most respected institutions, are failing. Now you have the presidency that's not being respected. And it's been sort of a tit for tat. There's maybe somewhat of a tit for tat in that, when President Trump was in office, people started talking about Russian collusion, locking up people, investigating people. They impeached Trump twice. Now he's been indicted a few times. So there could be tit for tat from the Republicans. The other thing is that seemed like, in my opinion, the Republicans were trying to presaging some of this before the election, and they were trying to signal to the American people that there's a problem with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and influence peddling. I knew something was going on with China, but I didn't really investigate it that thoroughly. It really wasn't worth my time. But they were sort of signaling that something could be wrong with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. All you can hear from the Democrats was, we have to resist Trump. Trump's racist. We have to resist Trump. That's all you hear. Now you got Biden in office. This is what you wanted. And we talked earlier when he first got elected that, you go to a masquerade party, before people make a decision that, they want to see what's behind that mask. Now we're starting to see what's behind the mask, and it's not very pretty. So, in my opinion, the initial reaction wasn't that strong, but now there's a stronger reaction from the Republican Party after they started looking at the details. So here's a short clip from a congressman out of Missouri who's breaking down some of the maybe goings on between the DOJ and Hunter Biden, where he tried to protect them, and now a lot of stuff is coming to the forefront. So here we go. So it says here, this is from a guy named Colin Rook. Says DOJ allegedly tipped off Hunter Biden before a search was conducted on his storage unit and stopped an investigation into a WhatsApp message in which Hunter Biden demands payment from Chinese official, noting that his father is in the room. So here's the Republican congressman from Missouri.
Claim the Biden Department of Justice is intervening and overstepping when it comes to the investigation of the president's son. Despite what whistleblowers described as a clear-cut case for tax liability on these payments, IRS investigators say they found themselves hamstrung internally. The testimony we have just released details a lack of U.S. attorney independence, recurring unjustified delays, unusual actions outside the normal course of any investigation, a lack of transparency across the investigation and prosecution teams, and bullying and threats from the defense counsel. This was a campaign of delay, divulge, and deny. Whistleblowers say reoccurring unjustified delays pervaded the investigation. including authenticating a WhatsApp message in which Hunter Biden demands payment from Chinese officials, noting that his father is in the room. The whistleblowers revealed IRS investigators were told by U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf that because the evidence would be found in the guest house of former Vice President Biden, quote, there is no way, close quotes, a search warrant for evidence would ever get approved. IRS whistleblowers told this committee that crucial information about the investigation was divulged to Hunter Biden's attorneys. For example, even an investigators had probable cause to search a Northern Virginia storage unit in which Hunter Biden had stored files. Attorneys for Biden were made aware prior to any search, providing them valuable time to remove any materials that could be useful evidence. Few Americans qualify for such soft glove treatment from federal investigators.
Okay, so this is they're claiming that Hunter Biden was tipped off. He was tipped off by investigators and gave him time to clean up certain files or what have you, clean up some of the evidence. This smacks of Bernie Madoff, who ran a Ponzi scheme leading to the financial crisis, and also Alan Stanford, where so-called people who were supposed to be investigating Bernie Madoff and investigating Alan Stanford tipped off Madoff and Stanford as they were being investigated, so they could clean up their files and sort of hide evidence and tamper with evidence. And when I read that years ago, I was in a state of shock, to be honest with you. And I know they said a lot of things about Trump did this and Trump did that. I've never heard this pertaining to Donald Trump, where investigators were tipping off Trump or whomever. But to tip off Hunter Biden and to say we can't follow through an investigation because some of the files or some of the evidence are in inside Joe Biden's house, it just seems to be basically the U.S. is no longer a nation of laws, and that seems to be what we're saying here. And today the Republicans launched articles of impeachment against Joe Biden. This could be somewhat tit for tat because President Trump was impeached twice. So ultimately, I think the American public loses because I think the institution of the presidents has been diminished severely. That's my opinion.
Well, I think too we may have found out why Speaker McCarthy was able to keep his job after essentially kind of voting against the interests of of the House Republicans. And all it took is one vote to it's either one or five that it would take to get him effectively fired for the debt ceiling negotiations. Those Republicans are pretty staunch, and it was a little bit of a head scratcher to me as to because he was kind of pitted between a rock and a hard place, and for him to take the less safe route of siding with his Republican cohorts and allowing the debt ceiling to happen. He voted to raise the debt ceiling and really didn't get that much in exchange for it. So maybe this was the big compromise. But it actually makes me wonder if this were the 70s, would this have been bigger than Watergate? And, I think when we kind of look at the facts so far, and certainly the accusations so far, I think this certainly has the foundation to be a larger story than Watergate. But the way that it has been treated, you certainly wouldn't get that sense. There has been not only favorable treatment clearly within IRS, DOJ, but even within the media. And, even, surprisingly, you know, you don't see a 24-hour cycle on Fox News, laying out every morsel of this case. So it's quite curious to me why this isn't being shouted from the mountaintops more. It's maybe, again, since even Trump has been out of office, Tucker Carlson is now booted off of Fox. It seems like they've been defanged a bit. I know in the background there's been a concerted effort to get advertisers removed from Fox News's platform, and a grassroots effort that has seemed to have some success. And it's been a largely and a democratic, at least leaning grassroots efforts by two young ladies actually over the last few years that has caused advertisers to pull off of Fox News pretty heavily. So I'm not sure if that's contributed to the muted response from Fox News, but this is absolutely atrocious, though. You have IRS whistleblower. I couldn't even imagine being that whistleblower. Thankfully, the reward. I think the biggest payout is $5 million, something like that, right, for federal whistleblower.
Yeah, but can you spend it? Can you be around long enough to
There you
spend it?
go, right? Like, where can you go with it, right? So I can imagine being the whistleblower, because they're going to get your name. Okay. They're going to get your name some way, shape, or form. I think you can only hope that they are defanged before they're able to get any sort of retribution. So, I couldn't imagine being in that person or person's shoes. But the fact that Comer has been on an absolute tear for really for years at this point, and kind of rightfully so, even if there is a clear agenda, because it is largely Republican led. The intention doesn't make the accusation any less true. It's always, because I've already seen some of that pushback. This is just Republicans getting pitchforks and fires, and it's like, well, did this man did he not do these things that he's being accused of? We're looking at some evidence that shows 20 companies were started after Biden became vice president. We're looking at clear linkages where Chinese officials are have relationships, which he's openly denied. Like that alone, like, simply, the man is on record denying so many of the relationships between China, between Russia, between Eastern Europe, that just that alone is enough to push, at the very least, perjury, at the very least, financial irregularities. Clearly you're obfuscating here. So even if that's baseline, everything else is kind of a house of cards. And the way that this is even playing out almost seems like a season of House of Cards, where clearly the president is using his weight. He's come out several times, even prior to becoming president, that his son is innocent, that they have no ties to Chinese officials. They have no ties to any other government that has not been reported that has not been vetted, and that just clearly isn't true. And I gotta imagine if Frank Underwood's character did have children, which I don't think they did have any children, on the show House of Cards, uh, I would imagine that he would certainly use his weight, his influence, in a very similar manner that Biden is using to protect his son and ultimately protect himself as well, because he's already announced that he plans to run for a second term. So he has pigeonholed himself here, not giving himself a lot of options. That if this comes out, then this is a nail in the coffin of even remotely running for a second term. Because at this point now, you're fighting for your life.
Right, right. I think also, I think there's also ties between Hunter Biden and Ukraine as well. So, a lot of the aid going to the Ukraine has been perplexing to the public. Now it seems to make a lot more sense now. That could be some type of what Alan Stanford used to call a round trip, where you put money out there and it comes back to you. So
Yeah.
that exists some type of round trip of this sort of skimming money that aid to the Ukraine, as sort of a favor to the Biden family, what have you. Also, instead of like a $6 billion accounting error that went to Ukraine's favor as well recently. So now the public can see
Yep.
why why some of these payments, the flow of payments to from the U.S. to the Ukraine, because it also benefits the Biden family. On that point, so Biden's approval rating just dipped a couple points. And again, it seemed like the Republican Party was trying to was signaling to the public that these goings on with Hunter Biden and the Biden family was out there. I think Trump alluded to it even when he was campaigning against Biden. So
Yep. No, he did.
I think
He absolutely did.
he put a message on Truth Social that every president's been bought and paid for by China or Russia over the past couple of decades. He's the only one who hasn't. So it seems to be what he's saying is pretty accurate. And so now again they're looking to impeach Biden. I'm curious about what impact it's going to have on his reelection campaign, in addition to his age and other issues he's had. I think we mentioned on a previous show involving pursuant to Dr. Cornel West that this is the wild card. The Cornel West, if he's going to run for president, is maybe the best time, because now there's a question mark about who fills Biden's shoes if he falters. Is it going to be Joe Kennedy? Is it going to be Newsom out of California? And can Cornel West pick up some votes? With this dark cloud over Biden and the Democratic Party. That would be my question. What happens to who steps in if Biden can't run? And I mean, the Democrats may ask him not to run, given all the shadings going on between him and his son. And now it seems like it had not only can it touch Biden, it has touched Biden with now the form of impeachment, articles of impeachment against him.
Well, you know what? I would imagine that Biden is probably going to try to drag this out as long as possible. Because if you remember, we watched a completely embattled Trump. There were lesser allegations, but certainly more eyeballs, attention, and an absolute media circus around the entire Mueller investigation and the subsequent fallouts. Everyone around Trump was either getting fired, indicted. It just seemed, or quit. How many press secretaries did they go through? Even one of the stories that I think got lost in the sauce a little bit is that even within other agencies under Trump's administration, there was the same cycling of department heads where, you take DHS, for example. They had a four in a single year, or a single year and a half. Four directors cycle through, because, either political reasons, or responsibilities. So, in other words, there was a lot of underlying turmoil happening that was reflective of his administration. And he still made it across the finish line in terms of finishing out his term and running again. So I can't imagine that, Biden will look at that and look at what's currently happening under his administration, and not see that as a possibility to prolong, to delay, to obfuscate, as long as possible. In order to at least run a second time. How Democrats are going to respond to that is certainly a question mark, is not a strong field. The immediate kind of candidate that will come to mind is obviously Harris. She ran, previously unsuccessfully, obviously. I'm not sure that, she has enough, I guess, oomph, so to speak, to get across a finish line when arguably, very few folks outside of California knew who she was prior to her presidential campaign. The American public got a lot more familiar with her. And the baggage that came along with her time as DA, her record in terms of incarceration record, especially when it came to minorities and specifically black men. I think some of that hindered her. So I can't imagine her dragging Biden's baggage across a finish line if she decides to run in the event that Biden ends up getting impeached before being able to run for a second term. I think Democrats will probably see that as well, but I'm not really sure if you are in a Democratic Party. I mean, that's pretty much a vote of no confidence with Harris. Like, where do you go as the party? Do you throw your weight behind Harris, or do you show that your party is in disarray? You have kind of a vote of no confidence for the previous administration, or really the incumbent administration at that point, because to announce the president is still the president. That administration is still in office until the transition. So you're effectively, anything other than the vice president being endorsed, you're effectively telling the American people that the current administration in office is a mistake. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how you spend that,
Yeah, but we already had that. We already acknowledged that on one of the previous shows. We acknowledged that there's a high possibility that Joe Biden can't run for re-election either because of health reasons or something else. And so I don't think anybody's surprised that this is on the table about his viability as a candidate. And I think you said that someone else would emerge. And you didn't say you didn't say Kamala Harris. So I'm curious. Other than Kamala Harris, I mean, is it Gavin Newsom in California, or do they have to just basically do they have to do they have to file a motion against Hillary Clinton to never ever try to run for president again for the sake of her and the party? Because I mean, could you imagine Hillary trying to wild horses keep Hillary out of the race?
I think you would have to. I think in order to um, skip over Harris, and I'm not a political strategist, so this certainly is not my wheelhouse. But just I guess kind of looking at this from um, an average voter's view, um, I think in order to push out Harris, say, hey, we're not going to go with Harris, we're not going to endorse Harris. Uh, Biden leaving on health reasons, there's no mark on Harris running, right? You can endorse Harris for that reason. If Joe Biden drops dead tomorrow and Harris has to step in, she turns into Joe Fool, right? And you've endorsed uh, for the next election, and good luck to you, right? But if he is indicted, this certainly puts a smear. Even if Joe Biden gets out of this kind of unscathed legally, much in the same way that Trump did, I think the same outcome happens where if Harris runs because Biden decides, well, I'm going to step down or I'm not going to run because of this smear, Harris decides to run, it still, I think, carries on her shoulders. So as the party, I think you have to show a clean house. So if you go with anyone outside of the incumbents at this point, like a Gavin Newsom coming in from California, you know, has this image of, although he's not young, but, by political standards, young, right? Has that same JFK, Obama effect of, young for the office, energetic for the office. But the only way that you can do that, and I think successfully back Newsom to where Democrats aren't questioning what the heck is going on, I think you have to do that across the field, meaning that a lot of folks are going to be unseated potentially. You would almost have to clean house to say, well, this is a new Democratic Party. This is a new era. You know, and here are the faces that represent that new era where, we are a party of accountability. We are a party of fiscal responsibility. We are a party of economic opportunity. We are a party of doing what we say we're going to do. Uh, and kind of showing these faces. It's almost similar to the Georgia election, if you think about it, where you had Stacey Abrams, you had Warnock, um, you know, these fierce battles, and even the approach with AOC. The squad, the way essentially the campaign itself. So remove the folks and just kind of looking at the strategic approach that they took for the campaign. It was a structured methodology. Each one of those women, from the squad, came in on the back of what ultimately would turn out to be uh, kind of a structured democratic methodology, a Democratic Party methodology. We saw it with Obama, and that continued into the AOCs, into the Ilhan Omars, and the rest of the squad, the Ayanna Presleys. We saw the same thing with even Hakeem Jeffries out of New York. We saw this same strategy with Warnock. We saw this similar methodology with Stacey Abrams, where it's this fresher approach to politics. It is a more grassroots approach to politics. It feels more tangible, like, oh, I can see, feel, touch, contact my congressman, my senator. They're listening, they're in the field, they're rolling up their sleeves. They have this sense of transparency. They speak with a certain rhythm in their voice. They use certain phrases. All of this is simply, marketing. And that's really what it boils down to, right? Is a marketing methodology. And I think that Democrats would have to show some similar methodology in order to revive the faith back into the Democratic Party. Because it's not only about the indictments that ultimately may come out of this, but it's also just Biden's record, Democrats' record under Biden. This man has failed COVID policies, he's failed student loan policies, he's failed promises that he has made during his campaign and first year. So it's not just the short term wrongdoings here, but it's also just the record of the administration and the Democrats under his administration.
Like, he came in office, or push for him to get in office, that he delivered because he resisted Trump. So his policies, he never talked about policy on during the debates. He never talked much during the debates because of the pandemic. He didn't have to talk much, which was to his advantage. But reading the room, when Kamala Harris was up for vice president, there were a lot of black women go on weeks. They were really pushing for a historic moment for a black president. After Joe Biden got elected, you hear a lot of black women talking about Chucks and pearls, wearing Chucks and pearls, in alliance with Kamala Harris. You saw a lot of people really pushing for her candidacy as a vice president. A lot of black women pushing for it. You don't hear that now.
None.
You don't. Yeah, there's dead silence. I think it goes back to a lot of people feel defeated. A lot of people who've been left out of the economy have felt defeated. And we said that a lot of these people are, voting against their own interests, or arguing against their own interests. What has any politician done for you in particular? If you're not a hedge fund manager, private equity firm, you don't work on Wall Street, how are you benefiting from any of these policies? I think they're starting to see what we're talking about. And you don't see any energy around Kamala Harris. You don't hear anybody even talking about, it'll be a third run for her to become president. If Joe Biden can't run, she better be nominated. She better get the nomination, or we're going to do something. Nobody's saying a word now. And you also don't hear what we call the Negro whispers. You don't hear the people in the black folks in the media, or cabal black journalists, or cabal black professors even mention Kamala Harris. Only time people mention Kamala Harris is the foreign press when they're making fun of her speech pattern. How she keeps repeating words in place.
Yeah.
That's the only time you hear about her. You make fun of her incoherent speeches or press conferences. That's it. So there's no energy around her, which is a stark contrast to when she was up for nomination as vice president, or after Biden got elected. So I think the sea change versus 4 years ago. And I think that's telling.
No, I think too, you brought up a good point. I think folks are tired, right? It didn't start under BLM didn't start under Biden, but and outside of these bankruptcy allegations, which seems to be turning out to be false with BLM. So I don't know what the motivation is, if it's a smear campaign or otherwise, but we can largely and unfortunately look at BLM as a failure. You have you know, one of the founders of BLM, building her own real estate portfolio off of the back of the work with Black Lives Matter, and you still have $90 million unaccounted for, missing, never trickled down to the local organizations. You have a large backlash. You still have police departments, both federally and on a state level, seeing an increase in their funding. You still seeing the deaths, unjustified deaths of Black men and minorities at the hands of police. And folks, and this is after the, we talked about it here, according to the AP News and New York Times, the largest protest in human history was during the BLM protests after George Floyd, where you saw anywhere from, 500,000 folks to more than 1 million folks that various backgrounds, both ethnically, socioeconomically, come together on a common interest that social justice and criminal justice, reform specifically, is a priority. And yet we see the result that very little has changed when it comes to policies. Qualified immunity is still very, very much in effect. We see it continue to be used. In fact, I believe Breonna Taylor's murderer, just a few days ago, came across an article that identified him getting rehired in another county, in spite of being a murderer. So in other words, we see the system continue to work as it worked prior to George Floyd's murder, prior to so many folks getting out of their homes and marching in the streets and uniting for a common goal, and seeing that goal kind of stepped on and stepped over, because over that same time period, inflation has run rampant. Corporate greed and price gouging ran rampant. Folks saw their paychecks continue to decrease. Their purchasing power continued to decrease. They're putting groceries, I said earlier, 30% of credit card debt is from groceries. We're putting everyday food on installment plans. This is the pressure. We're watching now AI boot out over 10,000 jobs just in the last few months. Folks are beyond tight. That's an understatement. And this has been largely under a Democratic administration. Some of that Biden has inherited, but I'm willing to bet the majority of folks, whether registered Democrats or not, if you ask them what is their feeling about the last 4 years and Biden's performance, the same things that we just talked about is going to come out of their mouth, and they're going to associate it with Biden. And some of that has to be laid at his feet. Some of that has to be under, at his responsibility. So,
this fatigue you're talking about is palpable. It's palpable, and this fatigue you're talking about is palpable.
Right. That's it.
The fact it's almost, the silence is definitely an effect that nobody's talking about Chucks and Pearls anymore. Nobody's talking about Black Girl Magic. Nobody's talking about any of this performative stuff, because none of their policies have changed the material condition of Black folks or Black women or people who were initially charged up about Kamala Harris. And what the populace is really tired of is Trump and the GE being correct.
That's pretty much it.
We've been spot on, and consistent. So it's like they're tired of being correct. Like, what's their policy? How's it going to impact you? all this performative stuff is not is good for TV, but it doesn't. It's not going to change the material conditions of black folks, in particular black women. And I think they understand that now. And I think you hear people talking about policy, and this fatigue is palpable. You're not going to hear more performances. They want results, and I think that on that point, I think there's a large population of people out there who are silent. I think who Cornel West could potentially appeal to. On in that vein, how does this benefit Cornel West, if at all? I think, like I said earlier, I think it's an opportunity for Cornel to pick up some votes and to gain some traction. I don't think he even have to attack Biden directly. I think there's a large population out there who will be open to his message. And the fact that you don't hear anybody, really rallying around Joe Biden and rallying around Kamala Harris, I think this fatigue is palpable. I think it could become more, how can I put it, be more tangible in terms of traction for Cornel West, and people showing up at the polls for Cornel West.
I mean, as much as I would love to believe that this would be an opportunity, right? Because it is, like, when we look at that picture, right? It was one of the things we didn't even add the opioid crisis worsening under the Biden administration to that list either, and it has worsened tenfold. But this is almost a similar opportunity to how Trump came in. The way Trump came in, it was a refreshing take, because I think to the broader voting public, here's an opportunist who has lived his life as an opportunist.
Hey, Torian, can you hear me? You may have to log out and log back in.
Oh, you said log out?
So I think we lost Mr. Mitchell. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, so, okay, here we go.
Okay, am I back?
Yeah, I think you have it open. I think you have the tab open, other tabs. You need to close the other tab again. I think you have it open too. You have to close the other tab again.
Let me see. Should I close this one out and come back in?
No, close the other one. It says you have it open in two tabs. You have it open other tabs.
Yeah, I already closed that. I already closed that.
Okay, all right. So, okay.
Yeah, I was saying that I think as much as this, I think, does present an opportunity, much like how Trump came in, where you have this person who has lived his life as an open opportunist, braggadocious, largely obnoxious, but had some level of respect and credibility as a savvy business person, media personality. But he was refreshing in the sense that he was able to talk about the ways in which he exploited his position, his power, his influence, his access in order to finagle his way into favorable terms and to reveal, specifically with the U.S. government, and to reveal those means and methods to the American public. It was, I think, refreshing to most folks to hear what we would deem as the quiet part out loud, right? So I think Cornell, in the same vein, has an opportunity, all right, to sway, to open up and kind of win hearts and minds of voters in that way. However, I think the difference is that unless he is essentially co opted by one of the major parties, either Republicans or Democrats, U.S. voters are largely, again, in my opinion, not going to deviate from the two-party system. Not large enough in order to give him a win. So much would have to go wrong with either side in order to open up that door for West to actually, secure the presidential election. I think at most he's, and the reason I say that is because we watched Bernie Sanders do that, and we see what happened to Bernie. And as we said at the last, at the last video, they are extremely similar in their approaches to public policy. When it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education, when it comes to carceral reform, they walk a very similar path. So we have a history of a candidate who, largely like West, has spent the majority of his political career walking the same path. So I think, albeit West is a different spice, different flavor, so to speak. He's going to bring some level of nuance, but I just don't think it's enough nuance for more people to deviate and say, well, here, this is our guy. He's going to get across the finish line. Let's abandon the Democratic Party or the Republican Party and give our votes to West. I think at best, I still land with my original, kind of crystal ball, you know, premonition that he's going to end up using the 1, 2, 3% that he may end up swaying and swinging those voters to, whomever wins his favor or is more in alignment with his voter base. I think that's the most he can hope for.
That's a fair point. I think he can. I think he can help shape the debate and help crystallize issues and move. I mean, put some of the I guess these populist talking points on the agenda and make everybody address these points. So I think he can sway the conversation, and I think he can get. I think he can get some traction. I don't think he'll win. No, I don't think he'll win, but I think he can get some traction. But when with Donald Trump, if he gets out of his quagmire, he's runs, he'll win, and the Democrats will have have somebody to blame. They're gonna blame Cornell. They're gonna say, "Look what Cornell did. He split the vote. If he had done that, he'd done that because it's always an excuse why the Democrats lost. Because when Trump won the first time, it was because of racism. Now they can say it's because of Cornel West. And I'm trying to figure out when people are just going to get tired of the corporate media just making up excuses why the Democrats lost. They're already making up excuses. They're already making up excuses on why they're going to lose.
Ice Cube. He's going to be the new Ice Cube. I say he's going to be, Cornel West is going to be the new Ice Cube.
Right.
How they use Ice Cube as a scapegoat to say, black men have voted for Trump, and to demonize one of the smallest voter bases for Trump. A few black men did vote for Trump, and that was their right to do so. But let the Democrats tell it, and specifically a lot of the black women, and especially on social media, seem to blame Trump's win on black men specifically, as if they took up 80% of his voter base. But, I think that in the same way, Cornel West is getting ready to be the new, the new scapegoat. So I could definitely see it.
But when we say the Democrats, I think it's real people in the media. I think it's people in the media, the cabal of black folks in the media who need to keep their perch. They need to, continue talking in front of the camera. They need to continue to write articles. They need to have people continue to pay attention to them. So when the Democrats lose, or if they lose, they have a reason why they lost, so they can keep their perch and they can have black folks continue to listen to them, talking about racism and white supremacy and patriarchy, whether it's white male patriarchy or black male patriarchy. So, but anyway, so that's our time. So that's Trump and the GE, Parses, Hunter Biden plea deal. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Like,